Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. No AJ tonight, she's already sleeping, can't moderate the stream. And I'm a bit late because I had to take care of the dogs. But now I'm here and we can run our service in the Verspätung. Yeah, obviously, since we are a railway stream, you have to be prepared for the occasional delay. Nice to see you, CD Raider. How are you? How are you doing in the Czech Republic? I hope the week that I was off was enjoyable for everyone. So, let's get my stuff organized. Theodoros, if you're watching this video later, thank you very much for the subscription for 3 months. That is huge. That is a huge support for this channel. Thank you very much. And yeah, guys, the East Coast Main Line, the Azuma. We have not played this on the stream so far. I still have not all my routes back. It's been a while since Train Sim World 4 came out, and I still do not have all my routes back on my Epic account, but well, most of it now. I'm still missing the Train Sim World 3 routes. Yeah, Train Sim World 3 Deluxe Edition routes, the Cajon Pass, Schnellfahrstrecke, Kassel, Würzburg, and the Spirit of Stream. Hey Spectre 4 or 477, good evening to you and welcome to the chat with your first appearance. Great to have you on the stream. And thank you for the follow on Twitch. Actually, Chili, what are you looking at me? The dogs have something. Well, you got your food. Settle down. We will take care of everything later. We will be playing a scenario, because in this scenario, for the first time in the history of Train Sim World, we have temporary speed restrictions. And this I picked for the first topic here on the ECM. You can see it in the picture here already, R30. Are signs concerning the temporary speed restrictions, but you might have already read about it on the forums that the implementation of the temporary speed restrictions are a bit unusual, to put it that way, maybe. So even with turned down volume, the music, well, for this screenshot, the music actually is suitable, I think. But all in all, I don't know what they thought that this music announces a train game. You have all the nimbleness of steam trains and stuff. Good afternoon. Today we will be operating the stopping service down to Peterborough. Due to the ongoing harsh conditions, Emily Turner will be contacting you shortly to update you on the current situation, most probably. So we're sitting in Doncaster, driving our train. Once it's in neutral, alright, you can have that. Dimmed lights. Unlock the door. Doncaster. What do we have? A 5 or a 9 or a 10 car train? A 9 car train. We're supposed to stop in Newark. That means we're not stopping in Retford. Stopping on this line is quite challenging if you don't use this thingy here on the top right, because the barber pole will always be too late for announcing that you have to initiate a brake. Emily Turner, hello, how is it going? I'm sure you're feeling the heat. I just thought I would update you on the current situation. As a result of this ongoing heat wave, speed restrictions have been put in place, and we have received several reports of the track warping. Warping? Please make sure that you and your passengers are staying safe during your journey and be on the lookout for any more potential hazards. I'm sure you have everything well in hand, but I thought I should let you know. Anyway, I'll let you get on. Take care Yeah, so when I played this the first time, I thought, so what exactly is she expecting me to do? I am running this line here with 125 miles. How am I supposed to pay attention to speed restrictions and potential hazards? Am I supposed to drive the line on sight? Because that will be more or less the consequence if we should be prepared to stop in front of a broken rail, for example, or a warped rail. So in a situation like this, some people on the forums wrote about it, and I think it is quite correct. When they say in a situation like this, you would get on the GSMR radio a notification by the signaler that there is a blanket speed restriction imposing. Oh, there was actually a 25 limit that I ignored because we were still going across the switch. Yeah, so they would impose a blanket speed restriction so that every train in a certain area is not allowed to go faster than a certain speed. By the way, one of the updates that we got during the way fixed the thing with the scoring for speeding things. Before that, you only got docked if the scoring system caught you speeding right in the moment when the points were applied. But now it is back to what we are used to. Speeding, and the next time you will get docked and only get half points or no points at all for the speeding. So, honestly, in a situation like this, we would probably get a blanket speed restriction if nobody knows about the situation and stuff. And then we would get this on GSMR so that we already know that, and there will not be a signaling at all for this blanket speed restriction. But here we will see the temporary speed restriction signs. What is great that they are in the game, but we will have a look at them and discuss the way that they are put up. So probably for playing this scenario a bit in the roleplay style, I would say the signaler is telling us that a blanket speed restriction of 45 miles has been imposed in the area after the I forgot the name now, after the spot where the track gets to a 2-track part. So when all the additional tracks and the 4-track part is done, we should slow down to 45. Okay, that means we should actually slow down already to prepare for that, and then keep below the 45 so that we are actually ready. And maybe they are also telling us that the temporary speed restriction signage that they put up might have been tampered with. That some signs might have been stolen or moved, so that we need to be extra cautious and report everything that is out of the line to the signaler. So I'm slowing down to the 45 blanket speed restriction. That is totally invented by myself, starting at the spot where the train where the track is only a 2-track part, and that enables us to actually see the signs coming. Because if you played that scenario before, when you're running with 125 at this spot, there will be no snowball's chance in hell to react to that. This is why I'm going so slowly here, to adapt to the blanket speed restriction. By the way, CD Radar, Spectre, have you guys tried out doing something with the editor? I spent two or three nights playing around with the editor, and it's huge, but it is sometimes super frustrating. Spectre says, for me it is quite difficult to comply with speed limits on the UK routes. There is not always the equivalent of an LF6, so it takes a lot of route knowledge. Yeah, that is actually true. Route knowledge is the key to UK routes. And CD Radar says, you have no idea where it is, the editor? Do you have an Epic Games account? There you can find it. So, we are in the two-track part where the blanket speed restriction is on. You have Steam. Well, you can get an Epic Game account, Epic Game Store account for free, and then download the editor and use it even if you are on Steam. Oh, on console it does not work, no. But if you have your stuff on Steam and get the editor on the Epic Game Store, then it works, or should work. At least this is what they are always communicating. And I almost got crazy when I tried to import LiDAR data and all this converting and reprojecting and retiling, and this process is definitely hard, and the CD Radar does not want an Epic account. Well, yeah, I feel and hear you. Then the editor will not rob you of your sleep, at least. But I thought maybe we can build a check signaling system in the editor. Signaling is actually cool. Building the track, laying the track is a bit annoying in my opinion. But putting up the signals is fun. So in case anyone is wondering why I'm so slow, I'm still running under a blanket speed restriction that I imposed on myself. And now I think we are actually seeing the first sign. And this is an announcement board announcing us, this is the two white discs announcing a 30 restriction. And then the rules say, we will come to that in the presentation, when we get to this board, we actually should slow down to the 30. And it should be put up in a braking distance. You're now entering a restricted speed section. Speed reduction are in effect on this section of line, so proceed with caution. Now, you might have seen a 30 with an R sign on top of it. This sign exists, but according to the rules that I have read, not on open track. We will get to this. So here we have it again. R30. Don't mix it up with the American way. If you encounter an R sign in an American speed signing systems, it's typically a resume sign telling you that you can go. Line speed again. And we will get to the inference of the R sign in a couple of minutes when we get to the presentation. Now we get the Mopeth board for the 110, and there is an inactive. Oh, I did not even turn on the safety systems, and now the T board. So that means the speed restriction is over and we can start a new board. I will actually stop my train here. Oh, but when I stop, the T-board says the speed restriction is over. So what do we get now? We get a sign with one stroke. People who know the rule book know this is a SPATE indicator. A SPATE indicator. Nice work. Now it's just telling us now we are through the speed restriction. Not at the T board, but at the SPATE board. This sign exists, but according to the rules that I have read, it does not work like this. So I will actually stop my train so that I can turn on my safety things. The thing is, if you use the Shift Control Enter shortcut to turn on your safety systems, you're only turning on the TPWS, but all the other stuff stays isolated. It only thinks, I think it moves this one here, the temporary insulation thing.
TPWS and AWS operational.
That is nice. So let's see what way those signs should usually be used, or according to the rules that I have read, and then tell the signaler how the signage has been tempered with. This is our line, and typically lines are only allowed to be traveled on in one direction. This is why we have two tracks, one for each direction. Only in certain situations the train can go in the other directions, especially if it is not signaled, then it must apply extreme cautions, drive on side, and so on. And on this line we want to impose a temporary speed restriction. That is a speed restriction that is not normally there, but we want to impose it there because of construction work going on or some special situations that require that the train slows down in this section. So the blue one is our speed restriction. Here the train needs to be below the speed, and it has to leave this area completely with the last car so that it can go back to line speed. A temporary speed restriction, TSR in the rules. And those speed restrictions, they don't come out of the blue, and they don't come like in our scenario here that someone tells you just keep your eyes peeled for temporary speed restrictions. Typically they are communicated by Network Rail, the company that owns all the track and the signal installations, and they tell the railway carriers, and the railway carriers tell their drivers in a periodical that is called the Weekly Operating Notice or notices. I don't know exactly if it is singular or plural, and there all the temporary speed restrictions that will be on in this week will be communicated. They tell you where it is and how long they will be there, so that the driver checking in for service has to check this this notice and knows whether on her or his route there will be a temporary speed restriction, so that those signs don't typically jump in your face like it is here in the scenario. At the start you will get a yellow board with a black number telling you how fast you can go from this point on, just like we have seen this in the scenario here, and this is called a speed indicator. The end is marked with the T sign. We have seen the T sign. The scenario did not give us the notice that we are out of the track here. The T sign is like, we have seen T boards in the London Underground that are used in the same way. They are a termination indicator. The speed restriction terminates here, but unlike with the London Underground, the train has to leave the area fully before it can accelerate again. In the underground, like all the speed signs underground, they worked as soon as the tip of the train passed it, but it was also a T board, a black T on a white ground there. Here it is a black T on a yellow background, and you get an advanced warning for the speed restriction, and here you have this sign with the white reflecting discs underneath, and they warn you that there is a temporary speed restriction coming up. And this is called a warning board, and the rules say that there is an appropriate braking distance, or they are put up in an appropriate braking distance for the permissible speed at the location. And given the fact that the permissible speed at the location there where we got those signs is 125 miles, or is 200 kilometers roundabout, we actually need a lot of braking distance to slow down to 30. And we got this warning board like half the length of our train before we were supposed to be down to 30. So when I... Oh, of course the presentation should be on. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm a bit through the wind. So, yeah. The presentation I was talking about, this is the railway line. This is the direction that it is signaled. This is our temporary speed restriction that I have already told you that it will be communicated in the weekly operating notice that every driver has to read before he starts or she starts her journey. And there it is communicated where the temporary speed restrictions start and where they end. The beginning is marked with this board 30 on, or whatever the number is for the speed restriction, black numerals on yellow ground called a speed indicator. Here it ends, termination board, the black T on a white, not on a white, on a yellow ground, tell you that here the or the sign tells you that here the speed restriction ends, and as soon as you passed it with your train, then you can go on. This is what I said. T indicators, we have them in the London Underground system as well, telling you that the speed restriction ends, and you can yeah, I'm sorry for that. I did not check my second monitor whether the presentation is on or not. Thank you very much for reminding me. Yeah, as I was talking about, you will get an advanced warning for the speed indicator. This is the one with the white discs underneath. We have seen that. The warning board was the first thing that we saw of the temporary speed restriction in the game. But it is supposed to be put up in an appropriate braking distance for the permissible speed at that location. And given the fact that our permissible speed was 125 miles per hour at this point, there should be a distance of about, yeah, well, 2 miles or whatever in between, so that we can safely slow down from 125 to 30. This is why I invented this blanket speed restriction, so that we have halfway a chance to adapt to the 30 here. In the game, the distance is about half the train length, and so this is not how it is supposed to be according to the rules. Sometimes you see those white discs a bit closer together, so with a more narrow sign. It is deliberately in the rules saying if there is no room, the sign can be narrower, but it is the same sign. And one thing that the rules require also, and that was not in the game, we get a portable AWS magnet warning us about this sign. So our train will give us a boop noise, and we have to acknowledge it by pressing the AWS acknowledge to turn on the sunflower and in front of a warning board. And this is a portable one that is normally not there, but it can be installed there to guard this warning board, so that the driver, even after she or he has read about the temporary speed restriction in the weekly operating notices, and then she or he will be reminded by the AWS magnet. And the distance between the AWS magnet and the warning board is normally, say the rules, about 180 meters, 200 yards, and at least, I think, 50 meters or something, if necessary. So those are temporary speed restrictions, and those are, as I said, typically communicated in advance. So no driver will start her or his journey without knowing that there will be a temporary speed restriction on her or his route, except for there is no time to put them into the notices, because you have to install them out of the ordinary and very quickly. Then it is called an emergency speed restriction. An emergency speed restriction is a temporary speed restriction that needs to be put up in an emergency situation, so quickly that it cannot be communicated in the weekly operating notices anymore. Those will be communicated via fax, say the rules, so maybe via email nowadays, but the rules say via fax, and then they will be put up in a special section on the blackboard where the drivers have to pass by to get to their trains. That is called the late notice case, and there will be a red border around it, and there will be all the messages about it. But sometimes this will be put up when drivers are already on the track and they can't read it, and to remind drivers of emergency speed restrictions, those that are not communicated in weekly operating notices, you get this weird thingy next to the track. It is a device with white flashing lights and black and yellow chevrons on it, and it is called an emergency indicator. And this thing will be in advance of even the warning board, warning the driver that there will be a speed restriction, a temporary speed restriction that may not have been communicated before. So those thingies actually should be in our scenario here too, if we don't get the exact location for the temporary speed restriction. Those things are sometimes called Daleks, from those evil alien robot thingies from Doctor Who. And yeah, well, but the official name is called an emergency indicator, and it should be actually in front of even the AWS magnet and the warning board. In a distance, as given here, from 200 to 440 yards, respectively 180 to 400 meters between the emergency indicator, then the magnet, then the warning board, then the braking distance, then starts the temporary speed restriction, or in this case the emergency speed restriction. And the emergency indicator should be protected again with a portable AWS magnet. So if you're actually getting a temporary speed restriction that is put up as an emergency speed restriction, not communicated before in the weekly operating notices, then you should not just run into this warning board and then into the speed indicator, but you should get an AWS alarm. Boop, you have to acknowledge, sunflower turns on, then you pass the emergency indicator, that thing with two white flashing lights, then you get the next portable AWS magnet, boop, train, again, alarm, you have to acknowledge, then you see the warning board, and then you should have enough distance to slow down your train from the permissible speed at this location to the indicated speed restriction. All that in the game, they don't really give us all this warning, they just start with the warning board, put up half a train length in front of our speed restriction. So that is not the way it is supposed to be set up according to the rules. And we will have to communicate this to our signal and tell them AWS magnet is missing, emergency indicator is missing, second AWS magnet is missing, and the warning board is much too close to the speed indicator. And then they put up a SPATE indicator, we will get to this in a second, after the termination indicator. Well, yeah, systematically an emergency speed restriction. Tea and biscuits meeting for the signaler, yeah. So it is. And then they have to keep up the blanket speed restriction because it's the only thing to fix it and send out people to fix this chaos. Yeah, well, what I was about to say, an emergency speed restriction is a temporary speed restriction that is not communicated in advance in the weekly operating notices, but only on a case-by-case basis in the late notice case put up there and then announced with the emergency indicator that is protected with an extra AWS magnet. We have seen those signs with the R on top of it. We will get to them later. But what happens if actually there is a station stop scheduled within the temporary speed restriction? So let's say we pass this and then we have to stop and let people in and out of our train. And in this situation, the speed indicator can be repeated or should be repeated at the end of the platform so that the driver, when she or he starts her or his train again, then they are warned that the speed restriction is here, so that they don't forget that. So you will get the same speed indicator sign again at the point where you start from a scheduled stop within the speed restriction. What we have used in the scenario to try to fix it a bit was a third kind of a temporary speed restriction. That is a blanket speed restriction, and that one is not signed at all, but it is only communicated via fax, just like the emergency speed restriction, put up in the late notice case like this one. I forgot the quotation marks here, and this is important, GSMR, yeah. So via radio. So every train driver in a certain area will get on the GSMR radio the message that there is a blanket speed restriction in effect, and that they have to keep below a certain speed, no matter where they are, the area of a certain signal box or two signal boxes, or I don't know how they can distinguish that. At any rate, it is not fixed to a specific location, but it is for all trains in the whole area, just to find out what is wrong and to prevent mayhem. On trains with ETCS, ERTMS in the rules in Great Britain, this will be enforced by the speed restriction management system within the ETCS computer. But if you are not on an ETCS train, like all the British trains in the game, then you just have to comply with it. So you won't have any signs, you won't have anything in writing, you just have to stay below that. So that was the third way of ensuring that the trains are not too fast. And some people in the forum said very correctly that in a situation where you don't know, because of heat situations, that the track may be warped or whatever, you will probably get a blanket speed restriction and all the trains will be slowed down to 45 or 30 or whatever. So what are those other signs for? The one with the R and the one with a stroke. We will get to this now. Let's say that the station stop is not like here after the speed restriction actually started, but between the warning board and the speed indicator where the restriction starts. Obviously we cannot put, like we did it here, the 30 sign up again, because it is not supposed to start here already, but the train has some distance to go until the speed restriction actually starts. In this case, you can get the advance board again with the R marker, what is a repeating warning board. Why would we need a special sign? Why not just repeat this sign? Because the driver might think that when she or he sees a sign of that kind, that they have the whole appropriate braking distance until they actually get to the beginning of the temporary speed restriction. So the R actually says this is a repeater, you don't have the full braking distance until the speed restriction starts. In the game, we saw the R more or less sitting on a speed indicator within the temporary speed restriction. What is not a thing according to the rules that I have read. Because once within the speed restriction, you don't need to be reminded unless you stop at the station. Then you get the speed indicator again. But not the R one. The R board only comes with the white discs and the warning board. Now this funny thing, the SPATE indicator that we got in the game after the T indicator. When is this used? You can actually find them at the beginning of a temporary speed restriction that was communicated in the weekly operating notices. It is a SPATE indicator. And what does SPATE mean? It means speed previously advised terminated early. That means in the weekly operating notices, there was a certain speed restrictions announced to be there for the duration from 2. And then for some reasons, it could be removed early or was not imposed at all because the construction work did not happen or finished early, then we don't need the speed restriction anymore, but it was already published in the weekly operating notices, so the drivers think that there will be a speed restriction, and then you can either signal the normal line speed here, or you can use SPATE indicators. So that actually at the warning board you already see this and see, oh, yeah, here would have been our speed restriction, but it was not imposed after all, or was already removed again. So that in this situation you would get the SPATE indicator, not after the termination board. There it does not make any sense at all. This sign is not to be confused with this sign here, where you have not only one stroke or strike in it, but two. This is not a SPATE indicator, but it is an AWS cancelling indicator in the version for temporary speed restrictions or emergency speed restrictions. So what is that now, an AWS cancelling indicator? What do we need that for? We started by saying that normally lines are always dedicated for traveling in one direction, not in the other direction, but some lines actually are used in both directions, be it that there is only one track at all in very rural areas, or that some track for whatever reason is used in both directions. So it's a single or a bi-directional line that is actually used in both directions. So we need this signage for both directions. So let's say this is where our temporary speed restriction is. We get the warning board after the braking distance, we get the speed indicator, and when the speed restriction ends, we get the termination indicator. We need an AWS magnet, that's what the rules say, to warn us about the warning board. And obviously for trains coming from the opposite direction, coming from right to left, they get the same stuff. They get the advanced board, the warning board. Here they get the 30 board, because for them this is the start, not the end, and the other way around. What was the start for us is the end for them. What works with the signs, and this is the problem now, does not work with the AWS magnet. This warning board needs an AWS magnet to warn trains coming from right to left. But as we all know, the AWS magnets are not, unlike PZB magnets, for example, are not mounted on one side of the track, but right in the middle. So that a train traveling this line, passing the AWS magnet, does not really know for what direction this AWS magnet is meant to be. It will pick it up either way. So our train coming from left to right will pick up this one, and later it will pick up this one again. And the driver, after he got out of the speed restriction, will get an AWS alarm at this point and will think, oh, what's wrong now? What am I warned about? And this is what the sign is for, telling the driver to ignore this AWS alarm. This is why the AWS is cancelled here. And obviously we need it for the trains coming from right to left for this magnet again. So those signs we need, because the AWS magnet does not distinguish between trains traveling from left to right or from right to left, because it is in the middle of the track and will always actuate the alarm in the train, and then we need to cancel it. For people who have watched my video about the British semaphore signaling on the West Somerset Railway, might remember this sign here. At one station, forgot the name, somewhere in the middle, a short stopping a station on a single track line. And on the West Somerset Railway you find this indicator that looks a bit like the Scottish flag, St Andrew's cross, white cross on a blue background. This is also an AWS cancelling indicator, but this is for fixed AWS magnets, for permanent AWS magnets on single or bidirectional lines. but has the same function as that one here, telling the driver that the AWS alarm that they just got was not meant for him, but for trains traveling the opposite direction. So that is that. AWS cancelling indicator, and we have a special version for the temporary speed restrictions, and not to be confused with the SPATE indicator that only has one stroke and is supposed to inform the driver that a speed restriction that was in the weekly operating notices did not make it in real life or to real life at all. What do we have apart from that? Yeah, we can have two different types. Differential temporary speed restrictions. We know that from all speed signs in the UK. This is nothing new. The higher number is for passenger trains loaded or empty, parcel or postal trains loaded or empty, or light locomotives, engines running on their own. And the lower number is for other trains, especially freight trains. We have this on many signs, and here you will get two different speed indicators on top of each other, whereas the lower number should typically be the upper one. If we have a junction within our temporary speed restriction, or within the time or in the distance between the warning board and the speed indicator, let's say we're coming from left to right again, and there is a junction, and only on the diverging track there will be a temporary speed restriction. Obviously, the signage here for the temporary speed restriction is the same. Speed indicator, termination indicator. But the warning board will have an arrow on it. An arrow that looks a bit like this, telling you that only when you go to the left there will be the speed restriction. It is called a directional indicator. That is quite self-explanatory. What I wanted to show here is that the directional indicator does not only appear on the warning board, but also on the speed indicator. If the speed restriction actually starts at the junction, then you can get the speed indicator with the directional indicator telling you that the speed restriction is supposed to be valid for the diverging line or track. Yeah, I think this is what I wanted to talk about, the temporary speed restrictions in the game. And again, I am super happy that they implemented this. Now I would talk to the signaler and tell that all this stuff is wrong with our temporary speed restriction here, and the signaler would tell us, okay, proceed. Obviously, I would not have stopped my train without asking the signaler what I am supposed to do. Let's say I communicated to the signaler that there is a lot wrong with the temporary speed restriction. What am I supposed to do? And maybe they ordered us to stop the train, and now they cleared it up, and we are allowed to go on. Here, this train does not adhere to the... Oh yeah, it's rather slow too, right? One other thing, the speed restriction is not actually in the game, so it is not supervised by the game. This is just for the appearance. You won't get docked for running through it in this scenario, so it is not really a problem. I was actually thinking, before I learned that in this scenario the temporary speed restrictions are used, I was actually thinking about using the editor for making scenarios with temporary speed restrictions, or would be quite cool if this can be a random event. But on the other hand, well, problem with random events of that kind is that they need to be rare enough so that you don't get the same random event like every third trip. They need to be rare enough to make sense and still happen often enough so that you actually see them in the game. If you have to do 100 trips before you see them for the first time, then most players probably won't see them. Okay, what we see on our go via location indicators that we are going Retford platform 1. That means we are diverging from the main track. We're not stopping at Retford, but still we are going the slow way. Credits to DTG for implementing a lot of stuff, Spectre says, but some details are in fact a bit inaccurate, like the slow speed section on Nittertalbahn as well. Yeah, but I'm totally for implementing stuff, even if it is not always super correct. But get it on its way and then make it better with the next route and next implementation, or even fix it in a patch. That'd be great. What is always a bit disappointing if things that have already been implemented correctly appear to no longer be implemented correctly on newer routes, like with the white indicators on German VR signals, or signal repeaters actually. German VR signal repeater, Vorsignalwiederholer, should always have a white indicator light. And on Bremen-Oldenburg, for example, they don't have it anymore. Whereas on old routes like Wursig Nord, they had it. So, I guess we will be flagged down by the signals for our diverging. At Retford station. Yeah, we are. There will probably be a release from Red before we are supposed to go on the diverging track to the left. So when you're running 125 miles, I have found that to actually be able to stop at a red light, you have to apply proper brakes at the double yellow aspect most of the times. Here's the single yellow already, and we are actually quite fast for that. I hope that the overspeed sensor system does not stop us. Should probably not be faster than 50 when we passed the single green. And now there is a red signal that is hard to see because it is hidden behind the overhead line equipment posts. Well, there is a overspeed sensor loop here. We are slow enough now, so no problem. Or if we're coming here with 80 maybe, then this, you see those grids, right? Those two TPWS overspeed sensor system magnets. Here is the AWS magnet for the red signal, and we cannot see the red aspect. We only can see the feather signal. And now it turned from red to green. We could not really see the red light because this mast here is in the way, but we could see the feather coming on. And this makes only sense if the signal was red before and we got an AWS alarm. So it was obviously a red signal here. Approach control. We have talked about approach control in a video in Birmingham. That's called junction signaling. And this signal is held at red until the train has passed a certain section of track, not exceeding a predefined speed. And then the signal will be switched to a proceed aspect, be it green or be it yellow. And this I have actually managed to do in the editor already, have signals with approach control working. So we're not stopping here at Retford, but we are not going on the main line for whatever reason, but still passing the platform. Go greens so we can just leave the siding or the loop line here. We have to stop at Newark actually. Yeah, and CD Radar, I think you were the one mentioning that the Vigilance system always goes off on the class 323 in Birmingham. And I think it does the same on the Azuma, even if the train is stationary at the station, right? Also, the Vigilance alarm comes on. It does not impose a penalty break, luckily, since we are stationary anyway. But the alarm will come on. Now we can accelerate to 120, but be prepared that there will be a reduction to 115 around the corner. So probably we will not be fast enough. So that we actually have to slow down again. Did I say the Suma? The Azuma. It is a sweet train, the Azuma, no? It makes you dream of running Japanese trains in Japan, actually. Already picked up the 115 restriction here. If there is giant screen in front of you, why there is only speedometer? That is actually a question that I asked myself as well. But I've seen cab ride videos of the Azuma where it is exactly like this. It is the speedometer and the time that is given there. Well, I guess if the train is actually running under ERTMS or ETCS, then you would have all the room for displaying the ETCS stuff around the speedometer here. So maybe this is the idea, they prepared the screen for the ETCS already, but then left away all the ETCS stuff, but only put the speedometer here. Yeah, the Javelin, the class 395, is also a maybe even a nicer train because it's blue. And I really like this design, this black matte plastic design. So, not get confused, where am I actually? Northgate. Can accelerate again. Why was I slowing down, by the way? Newark Northgate. Here, in this case, the next stop indicator actually works. Sometimes you get confusing statements here, from what I've seen. But maybe it has been fixed. Yep. I slowed down because I was already on the next section in my head. The section between Newark and Grantham. There you have to slow down after leaving the tunnel. Here you can still go on a bit. Before we get to Newark, we will pass this funny crossing bit. Here we get an alarm at a green signal for whatever reason. What is quite a curious thing, where we are just crossing a different railway line without any interjection and junction stuff, just on the same level. What is obviously a high risk solution. And what they did not implement at this point is a SPATE indicator that is in real life put up in front of this crossing part. So maybe we should talk about SPATE indicators in a different video. I think there is one SPATE indicator in the Isle of Wight, but I am not entirely sure if this is implemented correctly. Now we got a double yellow alarm, but it turned to green before we passed the signal. That's the thing that I was not able to find out yet, if this is actually how it is supposed to be. That some of the signals are held at double yellow until you are almost at the signal and then turn to green. If this is some sort of approach control as well, I don't know. But you encounter this a lot on this route. You get the AWS alarm, the signal is at double yellow, and then it turns to green, like this one. Ah, here's the loop section. That means we still can go on a bit until we get so close to Newark that we can slow down for the crossing part, because there's a speed restriction of 100. Does the Azuma not show a sunflower when AW? Oh yeah, it is. It shows it here in this section. Here you can see it quite faintly. And here, well, it is not actually a sunflower in the literal sense anymore, but it is the orange or yellow part of the sunflower that shows there. We will probably get one, then we can see it. There is signage for the overhead catenary, like deck sections and signs that would tell you to operate the main circuit breaker or the pantograph, but pantograph and main circuit breaker on the high-speed lines are usually always operated automatically, so that the driver does not need to do that. APCO, I think it is called, automatic pantograph control or something like this. And then there is MPCO, manual pantograph control. And now I think we can slow down or start slowing down for the speed restriction. It is, here is the Morpeth board that comes with it. Will we make it? There is this bridge first and then this, yeah, we will make it. Then there is the bridge with those side parts, and at the entrance to the bridge there is the 100 ditch. Did you see the sunflower now? And actually I am much too fast, I have to stop here. What am I doing, by the way? I was preparing for a drive-through. Well, I will blame it on the warped track, that this brake proceeding was a bit harsh. And almost like an emergency brake application. So, the stopping points in the train do not always agree with the markers, from what I have found out. There are special markers for the Class 800 trains. They don't stop at the regular stop markers. Or at least not always. But they have their own stop markers. You can see them here. Next to the signal there is the 12-car stop markers for regular train, and then further to the left, we'll have a look at this with the external camera as well. So that will be the stop marker for the regular trains with 12 cars. We don't have 12 cars. Obviously we only have, what was it, 9 or 10? And this is the marker for the class ATX, that is for 800 and 801 trains. And they can give you here numbers for the cars 5, 9, 10. Those are the formations that are working here in this DLC. Or all. And not always, if you stop at this marker for all trains, you hit the speed spot that the train, the game wants you to stop at. The signals sometimes have right away or closed door indicators, but they are not implemented. There was a second stop marker for 12-car trains and then one for 13. Why there are two, I don't know. If that is intentional or not. Grantham is the next stop. There will be on the way a restriction to 115, according to my route knowledge, before we get to the tunnel. We should start slowing down when we get into a longish right curve to the right, because then there will be the 150 miles per hour restriction, and then the tunnel, and after the tunnel we can start coasting, and after the second signal or third signal or something like this we have to slow down for the stop at Grantham, where there will be a 100 miles per hour restriction. But we don't stop there, by the way. Go via. Now they changed the icons to make it clear, and it is still not clear for me. I'm always confusing where I have to stop and where I go through just. I always enjoy slowing train by uphill. Yeah, that is true. If you have the route knowledge for that, then it should be enough. I will try doing this as well here in this. If I don't miss it, then I will just start coasting, and the gradient should slow us down from the 125 to the 115. And 125 miles is actually so high a speed that even when coasting slightly downhill you will lose speed because of the drag. Because the drag of the train will more than outweigh the gradient. How many cars do we have, by the way? 9, not 10. Alright. Sunflower again. Now I did not check whether the signal went back to green. So I will slow down. To like... Well, here's already the next TWS, but the signal is green, so we can accelerate. So if you're used to a signaling system like in Germany, where all the distance signals, Vorsignale and Hauptsignale, main signals, always have more or less the same distance in between, and it's sometimes a bit surprising how fast the next signal can come in the British signaling system or in American signaling systems. So it's actually good if you have the route knowledge to know where the signals are. Not only where the speed restrictions are, but where the signals are. Spectre says, I also think it is quite interesting that they drive 200 kilometers per hour in the UK without in-cab signaling like LZB. Yes, that is actually quite remarkable. Nowhere, I would have said on this earth, I don't know, but I don't know any other railway system where you can go 125 miles, 200 kilometers per hour, guided by wayside signaling alone. Germany, Austria, there is a limit of 160 kilometers for trains guided by wayside signaling alone. In the United States, trains without PTC or equivalent systems cannot go faster than 79 miles. This is this funny 79-mile route that was imposed, well, 80 years ago or something. After a train disaster, like always. CD Radar says, for our metro trains it is better to run on manual driving if you know there will be red signals and approach it fluently. ATO always rushes towards and then brakes hard before... Yeah. That's what they say about ATO. And this is how the AI trains here in the game behave. So, now I actually try to use the gradient to slow down, and I'm already slowed down enough because I played around with my controls while I was reading the chat. Or as we call it, RAV. That was the Automatic in the middle, right? I'm still practicing my daily dose of Czech language on my Duolingo course, so eventually I will be there to understand the rules. What does he say? Hodně štěstí. That sounds good, but I don't understand it, unfortunately. Good luck with that, thank you very much. Well, I have to admit there are languages that are easier to grasp than the Czech language. So, tunnel. After the tunnel we already have to not to prepare for a stop at Grantham, but for the drive-by. I think there is a 100 limit at Grantham too, so I actually let the train coast downhill. I don't think Duolingo prepare you for signaling and rules check. No, I don't think so, but it actually enables me to recognize sometimes words and know what word is actually an operative word and what word can, and sometimes the endings for cases and stuff at least are the same, and it gives structure, because when I tried to translate the signaling rules with Google Translate, I think that Google Translate even had problems seeing what is what. So I don't think that I will ever be able to understand that fully, but it gets me a bit of an access to the language. And I'm getting a bit of a feeling what all those hot chicks are for. And how a word might be written that you hear somewhere. So that was Grantham. We passed it. And can soon go back to 115. No, there will not be a speed restriction when we go to Peterborough. There will be no stop anymore until we get to Peterborough. And after the tunnel, we will get into the high-speed area where the flashing green aspects actually live. It has been discussed on the DTG streams a lot, that after the, I forgot the name of the tunnel again, something with the Peace, so with Peace Cliff Tunnel or whatever, after the tunnel the line will spread out and be 4 lines, fast and slow, up and down, and this is the area where they actually try to go 140 miles per hour guided by wayside signals. Hello, Eric Gans Smooth Forehead. Nice to have you on the stream, and thanks for the follow. Maybe I should do a video about this, those projects with the 140 miles per hour guided by wayside signaling. But those are those videos about the systems that never were and that never were implemented. But why not? I enjoyed doing this video about the ATC and CCS on Sherman Hill, about how it should have been implemented and wasn't. Maybe we should make a video about the IETMS and PTC in the United States. Allow me to go back to the Antelope Valley line. So now we are in that part that was supposed to be, and we have another speed restriction here, and it gets us out of the blue advanced sign, and here already. Just let's go into photo mode to see that. We have learned in the presentation today that between the advance, the warning in the, what is it called, warning board with the two white discs and the speed restriction when it actually starts, there should be a proper braking distance for the applicable speed, and the permissible speed here is 125 miles per hour. And well, obviously you can't slow down your train from here, and they used the narrow version of the sign, by the way, even though there is enough room to use the broad version. More tea and biscuits, yes. But see how nicely they implemented this stand for the temporary signage. That is nice. Well, the sign does not have the correct shape, the lower one. It should be broader and flatter, so not that high. And as we have learned, there should be an AWS magnet. And if it is not one that has been communicated in the weekly operating notices, there should be the emergency indicator, the Dalek thingy, and another AWS. But no, what we have a very short stopping or braking distance from here to where the speed restriction actually starts. So there is no way to slow down the train from 125 kilometers per hour, not even with a parachute at the end of our train, to get it slowed down like this from over there to here. So we should be at 30 here, and we have passed it with maybe 110 or something like this. Well, here the R boards, we have learned that this should not be here with a definite speed indicator board, but with an advanced warning. And then here it ends again, terminate board. We are out of the speed restriction, and then as a bonus we get the SPATE board. It does not really have to have any meaning here. How realistic is this game? Some parts of the game are really realistic, are very realistic. Signaling systems are implemented in a very realistic fashion most of the time, so realistic that it makes sense to talk about the things that are not implemented properly. Also the physics of the trains and everything, and the route layout. Many parts and many elements are really realistic, so that you can read real-world sources and use it for driving your train and operating your train. So like for the safety systems, signaling systems, most of the time it works if you read real-life sources and then you know how it should operate in the game. But like every simulation, it cannot be perfect. It can always be on the way of being perfect. I remember then the Baureihe 103 had super hard braking. Seems they fixed it a little while ago. Yeah. That always happens, and that you get trains where you think, oh, those things, they brake like a go-kart and should be like a train. But with the Vectron that has been released with the Trains in World 4, the guy who did the scripting for the simograph for the Vectron, William Green, he communicated a lot of what he was doing on the forums, and he was talking to Open-Minded and me on a private conversation as well, and this just gives you an idea how complex the scripting for driving physics of one single vehicle are, and of how many things, especially on a modern locomotive like the Vectron, you have to think of. And they are really going the extra mile for things like this. And obviously there are trains and locomotives that are implemented more realistically because more time and effort went into them, and they just happened to be better, and others are not that great. But as a rule, I would say that simulation wise there are simulators that are more realistic, but there is no game on the market that combines the coziness of living in a real world with great graphics and weather and lighting and stuff, and a decent amount of realistic simulation as does this game. And then there is that sound in trucks, yes. That is your Ceterum Sensio. The sound on the trucks. The trucks too. I've also seen a side-by-side of Cersei in-game versus real life, and it seems that in-game uses a lot more trackside devices. Oh, that might be so. Cersei is a bit of a special thing, was done by Rivet Games, and with a lot of stuff that does not appear anywhere else. ETCS, first and foremost. Swiss signaling of the N system variety. So for this little route they had to implement a huge load of new stuff. So I think they made amends there. I will definitely buy the Vectron when it gets out next week, a lot better than the... Well, yeah. The Baureihe 187, the Trax 3, is a story of its own. That was... Well, that was really quite a mess up, this thing. Skyhawk did not really do a great job on the 187, and it was timed really unfortunately, with Dresden Risa coming out for the first time. For the first time you have GPR selectors on the cars and the locomotives, and then a couple of weeks later the Trax 3 will be released, and it doesn't even have a GPR indicator, and everything is wrong and the sounds are wrong. So that was definitely a sad story about the Trax 3. So with placement of safety devices and other stuff isn't quite right, though I can't really blame them too much. It's not like the thousands of German routes where you already know how to implement PCB. Yeah. Most of the time, especially with German routes and here with the British routes, they use quite accurate real-life plans for everything. Signaling plans and plans for the safety devices. The installation of ETCS on the Luzern-Sursee route is for a big part fictitious, because doing it the way that it is realistic would have meant to implement even more stuff. ETCS, limited supervision, running on Eurosub and Eurosignum for Switzerland, that is more or less implementing 3 or 4 safety systems just for one route that sells for a reduced price because it is quite short. Question: how do you make the slides and gather the information on systems? Well, usually I try to get the operating rules. Like for Germany you can get a lot of Richtlinien from the DB Netz AG. For Great Britain you get the RSSB driver's handbook with all the stuff, with the signaling section and all the modules. And from that I draw my knowledge. I piece together my slides in PowerPoint. For American systems it is a bit harder because they usually don't publish their operating rules. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they publish their rule books. Sometimes they publish their special instructions. Then there is the Code of Federal Regulations in the United States where you can draw some framework data from. And then there are some secondary sources that are quite good, like Joseph Hewitt's signaling charts that are super reliable. And then I usually cross-check all the information that I get from secondary sources versus other secondary sources, and if I find it reliable enough, then I present it. But most of the time it is from rule books. The French stuff is from the French operating rules. The Austrian stuff from the Austrian operating rules. Also the Swiss stuff is from the operating rules there. ETCS is from over the board of operating rules. Yeah, that's it more or less. Did I miss anything? Canada is the country. Canada has a CROR that you can look up. The NORAC, the GZOR for the United States. Are those mostly PDFs? Yeah, they are typically PDFs that you can download from the... Usually you have to pick out the authority or institution that owns all the track and signaling system, like DB Netz AG in Germany. Well, owns it and administers it. Or administrates it. Well, whatever. Administrates it. Most probably the best word for it. Or Network Rail in the United Kingdom. The ÖBB Infra for Austria. In Switzerland, I think it is the Department of Transportation that issues the Fahrdienstvorschrift. In France, it is also a piece of law, I think. Like a second-degree piece of law, where the operating rules are in an annex, in an appendix. And then the SNCF has some documents that you can get from the SNCF that elaborate that further. And for the United States, you sometimes find it just on enthusiast pages where they have employees' timetables that are a bit outdated. Sometimes you can get the operating rules from the pages of the network carriers, like Union Pacific. NORAC rules you can get from the NORAC institution. But Caltrain routes, for example, I did never get Caltrain rules, so I relied on Hoovert's signaling charts for that. Also for the Antelope Valley, for the South California Regional Rail Authority. Typically, the smaller the carrier, the harder it gets to get primary information. Yeah, but this is more or less what I do. Sometimes you can also cross-reference it or cross-check it versus really good guides, like Brandon Cactus Choose for the Northeast Corridor has a lot of brilliant videos and guides explaining stuff, also for the Long Island Railroad. You wouldn't even know what search terms to use. Well, operating rules is usually a good word. Employees, timetable, special instructions for the American stuff. For the British routes, you would just go to the RSSB website. You have to register, but you can register for free there. What is the Railway Standards and Safety Board, or the other way around, Railway Safety and Standard Board. RSSB dot whatever gov UK. And then you look for the driver's handbook, and then you get operating rules for signalers, drivers, train preparers, or whatever. The RSSB handbook is written in an exceptionally easily accessible language, in my opinion. Unlike the French stuff, it is in French, but even if you understand the French, it is hard to figure out what they are actually talking about. Also with the German directives from the DB Netz AG, they are quite complicated. But when we stop the train, I can show you, for example, the RSSB handbook, and anything railroad is complicated. Well, yeah. The thing is, if you want it to be reliable and safe, it needs to be somewhat complicated. You can't just get on a locomotive and start it and see where it takes you. With anything engineering, the more you find out, the more yes, you're right. That is true for engineering, for other things as well. The more you dig into stuff, the more questions arise. But even though, after a while you get a hang or a feeling for stuff, and then the dots start to connect. And it still gets more complicated and more complicated, but sometimes you start seeing a bigger picture. So again, how many cars do we have? 9, and then we will go all the way to the end of the platform. Here in Peterborough. Again, we have a stop marker for all Class 800 trains, ATX trains. And here we are. I like how the gradient is on the base hot. Yeah, that is a thing. It is nice to see the gradient, but on the other hand, it is a bit cheating to know the gradient. So I would like to make those two thingies vanish, and actually it is supposed to vanish, but the thingies that hide it do not really work. I hope they implement the class 700 stop markers on the SHE, the Southeastern High Speed soon. I hope they do. I hope they put the class 700 on sale soon, then I will pick it up finally. Good work, you have reached Peterborough safe and without any further delays. Let's see how you did. Well, you get a lot of points on these services here. You get a lot of points in Train Symbol 4. You never got that many points. And here the Vigilance system. Yeah. So getting a platinum medal isn't really hard. I played it before, so I don't get the medal. What I really like is in the debriefing scheme that you can see where you got into speeding and where you did not turn on your wipers and other stuff. Apart from that, I still don't understand this rating for used safety system. Not applicable. Not applicable. You get more points for running with safety systems on. What the correct cap setup is supposed to be, still don't know. Honestly, I wish the United States had more national passenger rail. We have a shit ton of freight railroads, but I am more than 200 miles away from any passenger. Yeah. Yes, that's the thing, but I guess it is just too huge a country to provide a passenger service that actually pays and without charging an arm and a leg from the passengers. So they try to do it with Amtrak, what is highly deficient and not generating any profits ever. But I totally agree. It would be a great thing. 200 miles away from any passenger route, that is... Some people here with us in Germany, they complain if they are 50 kilometers off passenger routes, and then they say they are in the black country. But then the Trans-Siberian Railroad exists. We already have so many rails, but then again, the demand isn't really there. That's the thing, the demand isn't really there because there are quite few people traveling huge distances. And, well, so freight makes sense because nobody really cares how long the trains are on their way. But if a passenger train is delayed by 2 days, for example, for something, then this is not anything that people want to accept compared to flying. And as long as flying is quite cheap, I guess it will be hard for more United States passenger rail. So, that was already what I wanted to present here on the stream, but not the presentation, I promised to show you the RSSB handbook. Let's see if I find it. I think it should be here. Yes. So, that, for example, that's what it looks like. You can download it from this institution, RSSB, register, and then you get it. Train driver manual. And there are a lot of different modules here. What you have to do on AC lines, DC lines, and so on, and so on, so on. Speeds, for example, are discussed. There I got my knowledge about the temporary speed restrictions and how they are set up. For example, here you can find it. Temporary speed restriction, emergency speed restriction, and, well, the blanket speed restriction is discussed here. Defective or missing equipment, this is where it says that we have to tell the signaler. And here I got the knowledge about how it is supposed to be set up. See? I have a lot of examples. What you do if there is a signal in between. This is the cancelling indicator diagram. And there is one section in the rulebook about all the signals as well. Here, the one. So if you're unsure what the signals mean on the speed boards, you can look it up here. And there are, for example, speed indicators. But I did not want the speed indicators, but emergency. Here, temporary speed restriction signs. This is where I got the intel and information for it. America is really built of cars. I remember having a 3-day road trip over 2,000 miles to Utah, driving for so long. I once, yes. And this is where you get all the movies from, where everyone who is not living in the United States, they know, well, that is such a great country. You can just go on with a car for 3 days and are still in the same country. Yeah. Here the SPATE indicator. Here's the Dalek, the emergency indicator described. Yeah, that is that. So this is more or less openly accessible. You can download it if you register as a student or whatever. Yeah, and with the NZD radar says, and that is why I went to Metro, not learning all that. I see. You don't have to learn that as a Metro driver. I think you have to learn quite a lot as well. So a lot of it is available. You just got to know where to find it. Yeah, you got to search around a bit, and then you can find it. The German stuff is readily available. Also the Austrian and the Swiss and the French. French was a bit hard to find. But this might be because my French is not that good, so that finding the search terms for French was harder, but not so much, CD Radar says. Well guys, thank you very much for this lively discussion on the chat. This was the stream about the temporary speed restrictions. And CD Radar says we don't have million signals, but just few. Yeah, we will build this check signaling system, and there are so many signals in this document of rules that you sent me that you probably can build 3 signaling systems out of it. Maybe you will catch a stream. I'd be happy about that. So guys, also to you, Spectre, Eric, Grants, Smooth Forward, and CD Radar, thank you for staying with me, chatting with me. It was a great night, and see you soon, hopefully. Take care.